Okay, so I am making this video today to talk about game design. I want to talk about the process of iteration and rapid production. So I'm using this game as an example. This is a project that I took 2 days essentially to work on. I gave myself sort of a loose time limit and said, okay, I'm going to get as much done on this as I can over these 2 nights, starting from scratch. And the goal was just to get it finished completely. Now that doesn't include testing. That includes some sort of iteration and refinement along the way, which I'll talk about. But essentially, the idea was I have been working on some very large projects, and occasionally I find that it's useful when you start to feel a little burned out to go to something else and do something else that's maybe a little bit more approachable. But I don't think that I've ever done it where I decided, okay, I'm just going to get this one small thing done. It's completely separate from anything else I'm doing, but I'm going to pick a project and I'm going to try and get it as far along as I can in 2 days and hopefully try to complete it, just to help eliminate some of that burnout, so that when you get that satisfaction of, okay, I was able to actually get something done and it feels complete and it doesn't feel like I'm sort of spinning my wheels for weeks and weeks and months, because I do find that large projects can have that effect. So this game I'm working on is called Xenofeast, and the idea was to build a war game kind of as an introduction to wargaming in general. I think it's pretty standard or sort of widely accepted that the introductory war game of today is probably Warhammer 40K specifically, because it's just the most accessible. I'm not talking about games like Risk and Axis and Allies. That's a different box of frogs. But when people start to get serious about the wargaming hobby, now I've obviously picked a different kind of wargame here. I am not going with a miniatures wargame, obviously. This is Hex Encounter. And I'm making this because I have a game called Xenofeast. Xenofeast is this really nice little introductory booklet that is meant to get people's feet wet in the tabletop wargaming hobby. It uses Vikings as a background, allows you to buy any sort of generic miniature set. And what's nice about that is you can get very cheap miniatures online compared to what you might see through Games Workshop. Although their introductory boxes can be decent, some of the problems I have with them are, well, they're still a fairly expensive barrier to entry. But just because of the nature of Warhammer, it does feel better with large battles. So, it's something that if you do find someone to play it with, it's going to get old a little bit more quickly than if you had, a full army or even something like more complete, like 500 points. There have been boxes that have come out that give you that give you sort of like a 500 to 1,000 point army. I think the one that I picked up last was Indomitus, which was Space Marines and Necron. And there was Age of Sigmar box I picked up as well. But again, these are still expensive products. They're, and it can be a hard sell for people to want to play or get into a game that's $200 or more or whatever. So I thought it'd be cool if there was a product that helped introduce people to Hex Encounter war games, which are obviously far less popular now, but are a really important part of the hobby and the history of the hobby. Some of the ones that I own are D-Day at Omaha Beach, Hell's Gate, which I'll get to, Talon by GMT. There is it's a Roman war game. I cannot remember what the name of it is, but it's got a very misleading cover of these ladies that are on a chariot or something. And then, that's very unhelpful, I know. Advanced Squad Leader. I own the starter kits 1 and 3, but I've also owned Beyond Valor at one point. I had to sell it because I was just going through a time and had to make a little bit of extra cash, so I ended up selling that. Also, my Advanced Squad Leader partner in town was no longer available. It's not a very easy game to get people into. The starter kit makes things a little bit easier, but it's still pretty high level when it comes to instructions, especially for people that are familiar with some really basic kinds of games. You know, let's say you're jumping into something like that and the only thing you've played is Munchkin or, you know, Lords of Waterdeep or something. These are great games, but they're, you know, it doesn't compare just having to sit there and read through this very technical rule book and try to grasp everything that's going on. Not to mention that some of the concepts might be unique to people. One of the things that Xenofeast does is that, number one, it's an asymmetrical game. So the setup is that you are effectively Starship Troopers or Helldivers, take your pick. You are Space Marines, and you are fighting a battle against these bugs. So very, very simple setup. When I started prototyping this, it was much, much different. So the first day, I had prototyped a version of it, which I have blogged about. So you can see my blog at complete with an A, COMPLEATDM, I think .substack.com. And I talk about the process of iteration. So when this started, this map here that you're seeing was probably at least quadruple in the amount of hexes that were there. And it was very much structured after a standard game of 40k. I basically counted the size of a traditional 4x4 table. I know those are not the current dimensions for 40k, but the norm used to be 6x4, and Xenofeast uses a table size of 4x4 or 4x6. So I thought, if I take those dimensions and roughly translate them into how many hexes there'll be, then movement can be roughly emulated. And the idea was to create this sort of bridge between Warhammer players and Hex Encounter players so that it would be familiar. But as I was designing the game, some things started to change, and the biggest thing was disorder. So rather than units getting killed in a regular manner, the whole game is about disorder and the idea of troops needing to be rallied and brought together by a commanding officer on the Marine side. So on the Marine tokens here, you can see that there's a star at the top. That means that this unit currently has a commanding officer in tow. All the units that you start out with in this game do if you're playing on the Marine side. And this is an asymmetrical game, so the rules for the Marines and the bugs are pretty different. The mechanics are fundamentally the same. In a given turn, you will activate a unit, and unit activation has parameters. But the idea is that you want to hit a target number, and any disorder markers you have on a unit will make that target number harder to hit. So how do you get disorder? Well, once again, if you activate a unit successfully, you get to make a movement with it. So with the Marines, they move 2 spaces. The bugs also move 2 spaces, but the bugs have an ability that allows them to rush. It doubles their movement effectively, but if they fail in the maneuver, then they gain 2 levels of disorder. There are 3 levels of disorder, and bugs and Marines are both affected by disorder, but affected by it differently. And the way that it works is standard activation is a 2 to 6 on a 6-sided die. A 1 is a failure. So initially, it's not too hard to activate units. And the way it works is one side, the Marine side, starts the game, activates a unit, performs a movement and an action if they wish with that unit. And then once that is complete, they'll gain a disorder for every action performed. So as an example, I move this Marine 2 spaces, and then I want to shoot at him over this wall with artillery. I would roll and I would make the attempt, and whether or not that attempt is successful, I gain disorder. Now, I am allowed, with the Marine player, to make as many actions as I want up to a certain point, which is 3 disorder. Once I have 3 disorder on my counter, I can no longer make take actions with them. And the way that disorder works is it affects activation. So if you have disorder on a unit, it's going to be harder for that unit to activate it on their turn. Now, as soon as an activation roll fails, that turn for that player is over, and they can no longer activate any other units. And with the bugs, it's the same. 2 to 6 is standard activation. Every time a bug activates, whether it moves and attacks or just moves, it gains a disorder marker as well. And disorder for the bugs is the same, except that disorder goes down. It goes down by 1 at the beginning of their next round. Okay, and the same is it works for the Marines, but bugs don't break, and that's the difference between the bugs and the Marines, is that Marines will eventually break. Once they hit the maximum of 3 disorder, they can no longer take actions. But if they are attacked when they have whether or not they have disorder, every time they are successfully attacked by a bug unit, that will increase their disorder level by 1. And if it ever increases past +3, then they become broken. And a broken Marine is forced to retreat. So broken Marines have an opportunity when they break to retreat, and they must retreat into an adjacent space in order to be safe. Now, I'm still playing with that rule because balance is the issue here. I haven't actually tested this. I wanted to do this test tonight live, kind of to give you an idea of that part of the process, just because I thought it might be interesting to see that. So keep in mind, this game didn't exist in any form 2 days ago, and now it's at the point where it is in front of us and ready, and all the icons are made, everything is ready to go. The only thing is, I don't know if it works yet. It's kind of all theoretical. Now, the reason I did that is it's rapid development. So the idea was I have a time limit. I need to develop this as quickly as possible. It doesn't really matter that it works, but it does matter that it has the ideas that I want in place, that it has a structure. And as I said, with one iteration over one night, it completely changed from this massive map with open space where you had to move tons and tons of tokens on each side, and there were terrain features, to something much smaller. And I mentioned Hell's Gate as a war game because, well, for one thing, I needed a die, and the game happened to be out because I've been playing it, and I'm using the die from that tonight to make rolls. But another reason is I'm reading Philip Sabin's Simulating War, Studying Conflict Through Simulation Games. And it's a really interesting book. I would definitely recommend giving it a read if you're interested in wargaming. But what's cool about it is that this game I own, Hell's Gate, it was published by a company called Victory Point Games, who was at the time known for publishing small independent games, usually in plastic bags for a long time. And then near the end of their life cycle, they started doing laser printing and putting them in boxes, and Hell's Gate was one of those products that came packaged that way. It's a great little game about area control and supply lines, but what it really was it was a game that Philip Sabin had developed in order to teach his students at the college or university where he was about wargaming and how they could be applied to understanding tactics and war and this sort of thing. So Hell's Gate actually exists as a game inside the book Simulating War. It even has little sheets where you could cut them out and make counters or photocopy them if you wanted to play the game and you didn't have a box copy of it, so that's kind of nice. And now there's online versions of it as well that I don't know if Philip was directly involved in their creation, but you can play the game online, and it's meant to show you a few things, but one is that you can have a satisfying war game with strategy and depth without tons and tons and tons of counters. And part of the way in which you do that is sort of the field around a counter. So there are war games where you're setting up battle lines, for example, but where a counter might affect the hexes around it and not just the one that it's on. And that's sort of a way of, through just simplicity of design, emulating the idea that this army is bigger than it appears on the map, that the counters are sort of a loose representation of units or multiple units that might be in that area. So it's interesting. I haven't gotten super far into it because I've been busy doing my own stuff, but it definitely gave me some ideas for how far I have gone in terms of how to compartmentalize design a little bit more and simplify it and make it smaller, that you can have a satisfying and interesting game with very little space. Like, everything here could pretty much be printed on one spread, and the amount of counters that are here are... obviously, I'm going to be copying and pasting some of these or these. But, this is something that you could print out and put in a plastic bag and sell. It's one of those kind of smaller war games. And I just thought that a fun theme of sci-fi aliens, versus Space Marines was pretty recognizable and accessible. And I use Space Marines here in the term of that these are men in space that are in the Solar Navy. I haven't come up with the backstory yet, but we're going to stick with that because they are legally distinct from any other Space Marines you may have heard of from any other property. These are unique Space Marines. I don't want any trouble. Anyway, so where do we begin? Now, Xenofeast, most of the rules are actually written out already. Some I've been tweaking up right to kind of the last second. But the objective here is essentially that you have this threat track at the top, and it goes down to the bottom here. This is the dropship. So the dropship is approaching the planet. That's sort of demonstrated by this track and how long it's going to take. Every activation round, which means that after every player has had a turn, and has done all their activations for that turn, this goes up the track by 1. So let's say I activated these 3 Marines and I tried to activate this one and the activation failed. That's the end of my activations. I move this up the track. Then the bug player goes. So first we look at the track to see if there's any information, which there is. That means there's going to be 1 spawn. So 1 more bug token here is going to spawn on the map, and it's going to spawn on one of these bug holes. And I think it's pretty obvious how we determine which one of those bug holes it lands on, or it spawns from. So I'm going to roll the die. I got a 6. The first one would pop out here, and it would have to go into an adjacent hex that is unoccupied. So there is no unit stacking. There's no hex stacking in this at all. These civilians are being protected, and they're waiting for this dropship to arrive. As you can see, bugs are going to keep spawning, but no Marines spawn. So what you see is what you get for Marines, and bugs come out pretty much endlessly right up into the end of the game when they start coming out in droves. The Marines have some extra help. Number one, when they get attacked by bugs, they actually have a chance to counterattack and kill the bug. And they can also plug up these bug holes. So there's a way that that can happen. I'll try and demonstrate all the little intricacies of the game as I go. But they also have access to airstrikes. So these white missile icons are when an airstrike occurs, and an airstrike is very simple. You take this transparent template and you pop it somewhere on the map so that it lines up with some of their hexes. Anything underneath there has an attack rolled on it. That includes Marines, so if you have a bunch of things that are balled up and they're a mess, you might not be able to get a very efficient drop. So that is something you have to keep in mind as the Marine player and as the bug, because bugs are a little bit more expendable. You can kind of use them to get in between guys and create scenarios where they're not as effective as bombing you. You can't bomb civilians, so you're not allowed to put a template on top of a civilian. And while you can bomb bug holes, those holes do not plug up. The only way to bomb a bug hole is with your COs. So your COs have a nuclear device. You can move a unit into a bug hole, and you can make an attempt to plug the bug hole by bombing it with a nuke, essentially. And there's a little bit of a cinematic stretch here where if you fail in doing so, then you can lose your CO. I have to brush up on that rule, which I will as we go. But you lose your CO, and now your unit cannot rally anymore. He has to be rallied by another unit. So effectively, every time this unit gains disorder, if it's one of these units rather than one of these units, that disorder doesn't go away until another unit uses his action to rally the unit that is adjacent to him, that does not have a commanding officer. So there's a few different things here, and that's what I mean about asymmetry. The Marines have ranged attacks, the bugs do not. The Marines can use artillery to shoot over walls. Walls are otherwise impassable. Bugs only have melee attacks, so a bug would have to go around in order to make an attack against that unit. And so I'm kind of interested to see how this is going to go, because I don't know how well balanced it's going to be. It probably won't be. And that's kind of the next step in the design process, is that iteration and sort of testing and correcting things and trying to create some kind of a balance. Now, in asymmetrical war games, you don't have to worry about that quite as much. And this is what I like about war games. Very often you have war games where the scenario is skewed in favor of one player. Now, the thing is here, I haven't decided if I want it skewed in that direction, the direction of one player, or which player that might be. I don't know if it should be skewed towards the bugs or the Marines. So the whole point is to play this out naturally and kind of see how it works from the outset. If the Marines get obliterated in a couple of turns, then that might be too hard, but it could be bad luck. And so the only way to really go through this and make sure that it's working and make these changes is to play it. That's probably 90% of the time that you spend on games is testing them out. It's very important. So a couple of things here. We have a little legend that kind of tells us what things are. So these are disorder markers. They are increased by 1 whenever disorder is added, and they add modifiers to the activation roll. So if we have +3 disorder, then we would no longer activate on a roll of a 2 to a 6. We would activate on a roll of a 5 or 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. So activation becomes much, much more difficult. And the other... Okay, so yeah, Xeno units can continue activating indefinitely without this consideration. So that was going to get me to my point, and I tried to diagram this in my blog. But effectively, Marines are interesting in that when we have multiple Marines that are disordered, like this, we cannot activate any Marines that are higher than the other ones that are on the table. I'm not saying it correctly, but the idea is I have to activate one of these 2 Marines before I can activate one of these, because their disorder... These still have lower disorder than the rest of the units on the table. And no different than this, if we had, 1 disorder here, then we would have to have, +1 there. Then this guy would have to be activated before we could activate any of these other units. And that goes the same if there's like a disorder marker of 2 on this guy. We have to activate any of the ones that are below the 2, the unit with the disorder of 2 first. It's a little tricky, but you'll kind of see it as we play, because it will come up. Now, Xenos are different, obviously. Xenos can keep activating, but they will eventually fail, because, again, they're collecting disorder. That disorder is not going down. They're going to have a +3 to every roll. So they're kind of like these merciless juggernauts, but the idea is that they run around in giant swarms, kind of like in Starship Troopers, and they tend to get mixed up or confused, just kind of like a horde of stampeding animals that are not very oriented. Which they're faster than Marines and they have more stamina, but eventually the hive mind that's kind of controlling them is going to lose control. That's just kind of the nature of them. Whereas the Marines, they have some more abilities to try and assist with reducing disorder and keeping their units in good shape that way. And the bugs are killed very simply by a successful attack roll from a Marine. So if a Marine makes a successful attack on a bug, which is, I believe, a 5 or a 6 unmodified, and a 6 over these barriers, which with artillery, the bug is just immediately removed from play. So they don't have the same rules as far as having to be broken first and then not being able to retreat, etc. I'm going to try and stop talking, because this has been a long kind of an introduction. But that gives you an idea of what's going on here. So broken marker, that's where we need to rally with our CO. This gives us all the rules for activation for Marines and how they work. This is just showing you the track and what this bug symbol means. This explains how Xeno units work. This explains how bug holes work. Xenos can also move through bug holes. So a Xeno can enter a bug hole here, and then the player gets to choose, the player that's controlling the Xeno gets to choose where it emerges from, with the caveat that it ends its movement immediately after emerging from a hole, and there still has to be an adjacent spot for it to move. Marines can move on these holes, and they can stay there until a bug activates under them, and then they're immediately killed. So a little bit merciless on the Marines. I considered making that penalty a little bit harsh, and I might want to tweak that a bit. But I'm kind of leaning in with, if you have a Marine here and you're risking taking out a bug hole, you're taking a big risk. And if a bug were to spawn on this or any other spot that a Marine might be standing, then the Marine would get wiped out. Now, the benefit to trying to plug up bug holes is, of course, that once you do, units can no longer spawn out of them. So that is kind of how the Marine player is meant to gain some control here. And Marines also work better as a team. The bugs are not coordinated as such. All they can really do is run in like this, and they are the only units that can stack. It's the only exception to the stacking rule, which is you can have multiple bugs on here, and then you have to resolve their hits and then what happens to them, effectively. So, the other thing is the civilians. I've already explained how airstrikes work. Civilians are what we are protecting. A civilian cannot be attacked if there is an adjacent Marine protecting it. So the Marines have a bit of an advantage there, in that as long as they keep someone close to this guy, he can't be killed by the Xenos. The Xenos' objective is to kill all the civilians, and ideally all the Marines as well, and then there are victory conditions. So this kind of explains what those conditions are. Very often you'll see in war games that it's not necessarily a binary win or lose. Sometimes it'll have a partial victory or total victory condition, which I kind of find interesting, and it's maybe more true to what it's actually simulating, where we have a bit of a non-binary outcome here. There's a couple of subtle differences that may make bragging rights a little bit harder to be proud of. I mean, do you really want a partial Marine victory or a partial Xeno victory? No, you want to wipe out your opponent, right? That's what these games, that's what this game in particular is about. So, I've lost a Marine here. Here he is. We'll put him back. The only other things to keep in mind are, this just shows that when you spawn, this is where civilians spawn. And I do this because, if I were to print this out, which this is an older prototype version of this printable version, that I was using the Xeno head still instead of bugs, I would have it set up like this to kind of show starting positions, because this scenario is rigid. This is not a map where you can just do, obviously it's your game, you can rearrange things how you wanted, and make up your own little micro scenarios within this scenario. But this is kind of how the setup is meant to look. So this is a template that shows you while you're setting up the game, you put these counters here, you put these civilian guys here, you put your little dropship here. Just to give a visual aid so that setup is easier. I'm a big fan of having really clean and quick setup in games. And Hell's Gate actually does a pretty good job of that because it has coordinates on the hex map, and the coordinate number, it's like this little sub-coordinate, is printed on the counter to show you and on the map to show you put this counter on this hex on the map. It's very specific about the unit types and where it wants them because some of them have variations in strength. But Xenofeast is different. All Marines are just Marines, all bugs are just bugs in this scenario. However, the idea is that using this same sort of structure, you can create multiple scenarios. I was thinking of adding vehicles and different things like that, but doing it in such a way where you play through the scenarios one at a time and new concepts are introduced in each one until they start blending together a little bit as you go through the scenarios that might exist in the future. So maybe by scenario 4, you've introduced tanks in number 2, but then by number 4 you're doing tanks, infantry, and flying units for both sides. So with the same rules, the same set of base rules, just different conditions, different map layouts, etc. And again, when you put a bug hole down, this is impassable terrain, these walls, but these craters here are difficult terrain, which just means that once the unit moves into them, movement ends. Okay, so it's sort of a trick in a way to make the map feel bigger than it is by reducing movement. That's something that is a bit contentious. Some people like the feeling of just moving, a lot of space across a map. It feels kind of good to do that. The game style that I'm going for here, though, is not really that. It's a little bit more puzzly in movement is a bit more precise. For example, I can do combined attacks with Marines against Xenos, where I get added DRM to the attack. So I could attack with this unit, then add the DRM, the dice roll modifier, to this unit's attack so that it makes it easier. It hits on a 5 instead of just a 6. So that is a factor here as well, and the idea was to make this space very cramped and a little bit harder to position yourself maybe to be able to do some of these things. So apart from that, I have created some examples here, and it's very simple. Roll a d6 when a Marine wants to fire on a Xeno. Marines can attack a Xeno 2 hexes away. I don't even know if that's going to stay, that rule. I'm a little bit torn on that already, but it 5+ destroys, and I don't know why it says destroys on roll of 6. That must have been something earlier. You know what that was? That's right. That was the concession I made. So if the Xeno's 2 hexes away, then you need a roll of a 6 to destroy them. So it's pretty demanding. I mean, you're not going to roll 6s very often. So these are it's that risk and reward that I'm trying to do with both the Xenos and the Marines to make it so that choices really matter, and that it creates these moments I find where when you do make a risky move, like say, that you have one Marine on a map and there's a Xeno running at him, he rolls the die and he hits that 6, well boy, that's a little bit more satisfying of a way to be saved, maybe. To me, the best part of these kinds of games, war games and role-playing games, and I don't even really tend to think of them as being two different things anymore. And part of the reason, I think, is just understanding the history of war games and how closely intertwined it really was to early role-playing games. Now, I don't want to start a debate about this or an argument or anything. It's not really even my opinion that that's meant the way it's meant to be or anything like that. But just that, to me, the things I like about war games are very often what I also like about role-playing games. And it's that there is some kind of simulationist element involved in it very often, even if what you're simulating is not reality. And that at the end of the day, when you're done a game like this, the most satisfying part is talking about it with your friend and saying, man, wasn't that cool when this happened? Or, you know, in the case of solo players, and like I'm doing now, showing other people how it happened, showing them how these mechanics work, and, you know, just so exciting some of these moments could be. Anyway, we got a few more. So the adjacent DRM rule, artillery fire, I think I've gone over most of this, bug hole nuking, and that, oh yeah, Xenos have to end their move. When a Xeno does so, immediately add a disorder level to the Marine unit. I don't know about that. I think they still have to attack first. Oh no, that's how they work anyway. No, okay, I'm getting mixed up now. Yeah, so literally how Xenos work, because it's been a couple of days since I touched this, is that they move on to a unit, and then there's a resolution step where they resolve their attack to add disorder onto those units. But of course, the Marine does get to make a unmodified counterattack roll and destroys the Xeno on a 5. So even when the Xenos attack, the Marines still have a chance to kind of get revenge on them. And I did that because, of course, look how many more Xenos there are than Marines. So they needed some way to compensate for that difference. And then you resolve these individually. That's important to note. So we resolve things one at a time just to keep things a little less messy. And that allows you to do maneuvers and things as well. So positioning your units around the Marine so that when this Marine becomes broken, he has no escape route, and that's how Marines are destroyed. When they can't escape and they cannot rally is how they get destroyed. And now, civilians, again, cannot be attacked. Civilians don't break. Once they have acquired disorder level 3, if attacked once more, they're just automatically removed. They can't break, they can't lose disorder. So for civilians, disorder effectively does act as hit points, which is the one exception to this hit pointless game, even though we're pretty much doing the same thing, but in a different way. So, the Marine player is going to go first. I'm going to start activating units. Now, I have these cities here to protect. These ones, well, none of them are in a great position. These ones are closest to these, but we have more units here kind of blocking the path. And there's a lot of walking space to get from here to there. That's multiple turns for us to get up and protect these guys. However, they also have a bunch of bugs coming at them. So I think what the best course of action here is probably a passive start. We don't want to get too brave with our Marines yet and start having them die. So this one is positioned great because he can attack over that wall. Over here, we are not so lucky. These Marines would have to come out of position in order to do anything. But we do have the 2 hex rule. So the first unit I'm going to activate is this guy. And you may not activate a unit in a turn. That is one thing. So we still have to roll. Even though it's our first guy, we have to roll to see if he's going to activate or not. So I'm going to roll the die. I got a 2. So that's an activation. We just have to avoid a 1. He's going to move 2 spaces here. And then he is going to attack this Xeno here. Now, because he's going to attack, I'm just going to automatically bring this over. Because we know he's gaining disorder. He's making an action, so he gains disorder automatically just for making that action. And he's going to hit this spider on a roll of a 6. I could move this guy up as well. See, the problem with the system that I'm just sort of realizing now is that you'd have to have Marines positioned prior. I can't move guys into position, boom, 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 and get them all to start firing. That's actually not a possibility here. So that's a consideration when I go back and tweak. That might work just fine, but it might be that's part of the strategy, or if that's just too complex or adds too much frustration, then I might have to consider doing something different with movement, but we'll just see. Because I don't want to add too much at the same time. For now, we're just going to fire on this bug. So the bug gets shot, actually. That's a roll of a 6. So right off the bat, we have 1 dead bug, which is good for the Marines. Now, he can't move again, and nothing else is in range of his fire. So effectively, his turn is over. He's got +1 disorder at the moment. And we're going to roll for our next unit. Now, If I wanted to activate him again, the rule is that because he has +1 disorder and all the other units have no disorder, they would all have to activate and be at an equal level of disorder as him in order for him to activate again. And this is just kind of a way to balance out activations with the Marines. Because the idea is, again, they're a little bit more, I want to say, ordered and systematic than the bugs. The bugs are kind of chaotic. That's kind of where I want the asymmetry to come in play as far as feel goes. So we will go ahead and activate this guy next, and he can fire over this wall with that 6 activation, or with that 6 number. Now, it's a little bit strange, like activation right now does not get affected by the 2 hex distance, which means it's not further modified either. I still think that's okay. I don't want to cripple the Marines too much by saying, oh, you can't do artillery fire over 2 hexes. I kind of want to play with it just as the rules are written now, because everything is written down the way it's supposed to be. And if I make any changes, it'll just be easier to track what was changed. And I'll make notes kind of as I go. And that's the cool thing about the software that I'm using called Mural, which is I can just sort of drag in text or sticky notes even. And using those, I can kind of keep track of things like this. So I can drag a sticky note on and just say, consider activation rule or something like that, or artillery rule. Consider artillery firing distance. Boom. Now it's in a note, and as long as I stretch her out and keep it visible, then I will know to look at this after the test is done. So we're going to activate this unit here and try and get him to do his artillery fire. So first we have to see if he activates. We got a roll of 6, so that's fine, and we're going to use his action to fire. He got a 2. That's a miss. So right now, he has got a 2. He's gained 1 disorder. Now, he is allowed to continue making these attacks, but he will continue to gain disorder. And the problem with doing so is that if, let's say, he was able to be rushed. Now, in this situation, that doesn't look to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't look to be possible that he can be rushed, so it might be safe for him to take 1 more shot, because we know all the bug is going to do to him, if it gets to him, is bring him down by 1. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to take another shot, another 2, unfortunately, and we're just going to replace that activation marker, or that disorder marker, with the next level up, to show that he is now disordered at a 2+ here. So these guys have activated. Now I'm just trying to think here. This area isn't too dangerous. He can't rush us here, which is kind of the nice thing. But do we want to get a shot on him? Now, if I keep this Marine adjacent to the civilian, then we're pretty safe over here. So I think it's worth it to use our movement to move in here. We have to stop because it's rough terrain, and take a shot at the Xeno. And we actually got a 6 that time. So he is at +1 disorder because he used 1 action, which didn't come up because I am using the wrong keyboard. Here we go. And this bug is destroyed as well. So that's kind of nice. Good little start for us here. Now, this is where things are going to get a bit hairy. I don't want to bunch my units up here. That's kind of going to be the challenge, is that we don't want our units stuck too badly. We want them to be able to collaborate a bit. Now, what I could do is I could move him here, and I could make an artillery attack. The odds are a little sketchy, but what I might do is I'm going to move him up. He's going to make an attack. We have to activate him first. So he activates at a 6. He's going to make an attack against this guy here. So we're going to roll. That's another 6. Okay, that's pretty lucky. So my plan was actually to see if I could wipe him out or not, but then do something different with the other 2 Marines here. I got lucky there. He has to gain a disorder. So we'll give him one of those. And now these guys here, I'm going to move this one here. And this guy is going to move right into here, I think. It's a bit risky to do that, but risky's more fun. And I think that players, if I thought about myself as just a player of the game, I'd want to move my guys as quickly as possible out of this spot so I can actually get them doing something effective. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to add the DRM modifier to my attack roll here. But one of these guys, only one is going to be able to roll. So rather than a 6, I'm going to hit this guy at a 5, but I only get the one roll at it, and it's going to give them both disorder to do this. That's another thing. Both disorder or one disorder. So I'm going to make another sticky note, and we're going to say do both units get disordered if one is adding their DRM modifier. Also, do both attack or no. And this is just, again, things that we can play with for balancing here. For now, I'm going to go harsh. We're going to say they do. And I'm going to roll my attack. I need a 5 or a 6 now to kill the Xeno. I got a 3, so it didn't help us. We did start getting some of our guys moving, so that's a positive. So I'm also going to move him here, and he's going to fire a shot. So we're going to do another disorder here if he can activate. I'm going to check that first. And I think I'm going to check activation for the other guy. I'm trying to move a little fast here, but I passed both anyways. I got a 4 and then a 3. So he's taking his shot against this bug at a 6. And he got a 5, so that is a miss. And then we're going to move him up here, actually right here, and then him up here. So yeah, we'll activate him first. He has activated at a 5. And he will take another pot shot at the Xeno. And that's a 6. That Xeno is down. Oh, I think I put them the wrong guy. Alright, bug, you're gone anyway. So, managed to clear out some of these bugs here, which is good. We're still activating. I'm going to see if I can... I'm not going to activate this unit because it's risky. Again, as soon as I fail an activation, then I have no more activations. So... I'm just going to wait. I'm going to be a little bit more safe. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to activate this guy first. And that's a 3. He's going to take a shot over the bunker here, or over the barrier. So we're going to put a marker on him. And that is going to be a 4. That's a miss. And then we're going to activate him. And he's going to fire over the barrier as well. And that's at a 4, so that's a miss. So everything's activated except him. Now I'll try and activate him, just because he's the last one. And the way the rules are set up, that's an activation of 5, so you get to move 1. I can continue activating until I fail. And that includes any guys I didn't activate or do something with. But that's another consideration for the drawing board, I think, because I'm a little bit torn on how long this might keep going. So those numbers might have to be mixed up a bit. So let's say look at activation rules for balance. Can units keep activating forever? That's the way it was originally designed, so we will keep doing that. Now, he's technically activated. You don't have to take a marker to activate, but again, I can't activate anything else until these guys have an equal number of modifiers. Because they don't have any modifiers, I think that's where the balance comes, is that they can activate, but they can't really do a whole lot. And I don't want to abandon this, and I can't move through these guys. At least that's not in the rules yet. So for now, we're just going to say that their turn is over. And now that the Marine turn is over, this moves up the track, and we're going to spawn a bug. So I have to roll a die. It's a 3, which means that a bug is going to come back out here. And as the bug player, I have to decide where is the most appropriate place for that bug to go. It's probably not over here because I want to start attacking Marines. And I want to kind of stop them before they start flooding out of here. So he's just going to come right here. That's where he's going to spawn. And now my bugs get to start activating. So I'm going to go with the most obvious ones first, is that this bug will activate. And he's going to attack the Marine. And the Marine's activation goes up by 1 level. So he's at +2 now because the bug has effectively attacked him. At this point, he does not have to move because he does get a counterattack as well. And then this is another rule I was going to talk about, so I'm glad this is happening now because I'm ready to talk about my ideas for this, is that he is going to counterattack, and the way that works, once again, oh yeah, we got that over here. So the Marine unit makes unmodified counterattack roll, destroying Xeno +5. Okay, so very simple. If I roll 5, he destroys the Xeno. He rolls a 6, so the Xeno is gone, but has given him some extra disorder. That's really how Xenos are supposed to function. So we're going to try and activate this Xeno, and he activates. He's going to rush in and do the same, and now this is where things are going to get interesting, hopefully, is we have a +3 on this Marine now. Whoa, this Marine's in pretty rough shape. So he gets a counterattack. It's a 5, so it destroys the bug. But this Marine is now at +3. If he gets hit one more time, then he's in big trouble. And I think I'm just going to go with that. Now, the bug here gets to do an activation. And the way that works is we need to move that bug as far as we can. So I'm going to read that rule. If the result is less than 4, they may simply normal movement but take +2 disorder marker. Okay, so I have to roll a 4, 5, or 6. It's pretty much 50-50 to see if I can rush with this bug. So it's a 1. So he doesn't rush. He still gets to take his movement. So he's still going to move towards the Marine. But I'm going to move him up this way because I'll just move him through the hole like that. I know he can't land on holes, but I never said that they can move over them. It seems to make sense he can move over his own bug holes, so we're going to go with that. And then this Marine, or not the Marine rather, the Xeno gets a disorder of +2. So that Xeno is now disordered. And it's going to make it hard for him to continue to activate. But he can. That's the cool thing about the Xenos. So let's demonstrate that. He's got a +2 now to his activation. So let's try and activate and we'll see what happens. He got a 6, but if he had if he had rolled anything less than, I think, a 4, then he wouldn't have been able to activate. So in this case, he's lucky he does. This is where things get interesting. We get to rush this Xeno, or this Marine. So of course he gets his counterattack, but he breaks. So the reason why he gets a counterattack, the logic there, rather than, oh, he's broken so he doesn't get to do this now, is this is simultaneous combat, is what's going on here. So this is like the Marines and the bugs. Bugs are running at the Marines are shooting the bugs. And then, it's that whole cinematic idea of they shoot all the bugs, but one, leaps over that they didn't notice and grabs a guy from behind and kills him, whatever. And then they watch their buddy splat into pieces, and now morale is busted. So he has failed the counterattack, and he is broken. And what this means is this broken Marine has to be able to retreat to an adjacent space. And he does have a way to do so. He can move out here. I might think about how rough terrain affects that. I think it might be interesting if they couldn't escape from rough terrain just because of the nature of it. So I'm going to add a quick note on that too. And we'll just say consider marine destruction if breaks on rough ground. Why not? I don't know if it's necessary, but it seems like it could be something to play with. So the marine, it has moved, he's retreated, but he's still broken. Now a broken marine is a very unhappy marine. And the idea is that if a broken marine is attacked one additional time, the marine is dead. But there was nowhere... I guess we could have made him escape here. But the whole idea is that he's running away. So I might have to play with that idea of, like, where can he move? It feels weird that he'd be moved into here and that he could move that way rather than that way. I don't know. Another thing to consider as far as continued playtesting goes. But we do have a broken marine. Now... we have a bunch of dead bugs at the same time, but we have a bunch of pretty heavily disordered marines. What we're going to do is this bug is going to come down and just is going to finish the job. So once again, the marine can counterattack, but he is broken. I would say in the case of a broken counterattack, counterattack of broken, let's say 6, right? Instead of 5. That seems to make sense to me. So, marine counterattack at 6 instead of 5. Result when broken. That seems kind of a fair concession. So, the marine dies. He does not kill our bug friend. The bug lives to fight another day. And we have 1 marine is now down. This is really bad for us. Now, there's another little sub-rule. And I'm still tinkering with it. But my idea was that if this happened, you could sacrifice your CO. And that's one of the 2 ways you could sacrifice them. For now, I'm going to leave it out because I want to finish this round and kind of wrap this up. I don't want to sit here and play the whole thing out, but just gives you an idea of what playtesting is like, what the process of iteration is like. Because as you can see, we have a few holes where there were things that I didn't necessarily consider. Because again, I'm developing this very rapidly. And so we have some notes now. And this is going to help inform us on the next session. I'm going to continue to play this one out. Because I think that that's important to do. But that'll kind of give us a really good starting point from which to continue building on this design. So he's going to move into... oh yeah, he moved into there. I don't believe he has +2 disorder. That was from something else. So we don't have to worry about that or these. I may have messed this up a bit, I don't know, but whatever. We're going to move on. So we still have a Xeno here that has not activated. Now what's cool again is that there are rules that say we can move our bugs to different holes. And just to show you how that works, it's very simple. I've got a bunch of marines that are now starting to spread out here. I'm worried about that. I could spend a couple turns moving through all this muck, but it's going to take me a bit to get there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and activate my bug. That's an activation of 3, so he's good. And he would move in through here, and then I would park him over here, and then give him a +1 for that activation. And we should have done a +1 on this guy too. I mean, it's possible I might even keep activating, but I just want to keep things moving along here for now. So, same up here. We're going to try and activate this guy here. He's got a 4, so he's good. He's going to move in there and stop his movement. Even if we rushed him, once you hit this rough ground, you got to stop. And that gives the Marines a bit of time to maybe kind of deal with him. And where's my Control B? I keep hitting my wrong keyboard. I've got a sort of a mechanical keyboard, but I'm plugging the mic in where it was. I can't find my USB adapter. So anyway, that's a plus. Oh, that's a +2. We don't want that. You don't get a +2, buddy. You get a +1. And then this guy here, I think we would do the same with. Try and activate him. And that's a 2. So he does make it, but just barely. But that's okay. He doesn't need to do the best job. He just has to get there. I don't want to waste time activating this guy because, you know, he can't really do a whole lot right now. I could get him down here as backup. I might do that. But I kind of want to see, they have a bit of a weak spot here now with this guy moved. Maybe there's something I can do about that. So I need 3 to move into there, so I just have to deal with a regular activation, which is a 6. And then this guy here, I'm going to activate him as well, and I think I'm going to do a normal movement with him. He activates at a 2, so he's good as well. So the bugs are doing pretty good activations as well. And now these guys here, it's going to take me a while to get over here, but I don't want to rely totally on this. So I'm going to use the bug hole magic here. Oh, now I've rolled a 1, so activation ends for the bugs. That's it. They don't get to activate anything else. That activation has failed. That bug doesn't move, doesn't gain disorder or anything. It just stops dead where it is. Boom, we move up the track. So far I've been recording for about an hour, and I think that's plenty. I don't want to like bog this down too much for you guys. It's already long enough as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this game state, and I'm going to continue playing and work on the game a little bit and go through my notes, and then I'll start iterating, kind of reviewing how the game went. My assessment right now is that, I mean, not too many bugs have come out, right? We've only moved twice. We're gonna spawn another one here. So if I were to like spawn this one, he would spawn at 5. So he's gonna come in here. But the cool, like, we've already killed 1 Marine. So we're 2 turns in effectively, and 1 Marine has already been wiped out of existence. That's quite a lot of firepower if you consider the amount of Marines. But they have taken out a ton of bugs. So they took out 5 bugs. I just moved one back over here to bring him back in as a spawn, which is not too bad. So the Marines might be playing with some pretty heavy firepower. But mind you, I was rolling really, really high for their attacks. So guys, this is a little messy and a little off the cuff, but it's really just to show you the way that I write my blog. I try to be a little bit more structured about these things. So if you want more structured material, the blog is probably the better way to do it, because when I'm writing, it's just a lot easier to break things down step by step. But I think the benefit of video as opposed to writing, and why I kind of do both, but I'm more lean on writing, is that with video, you can kind of get the feel for like this process. And you can kind of see what it's like. Now, I've already built all this stuff, but I might do a follow-up where, you know, I consider these changes, and maybe I do change some things around on the map, where I do change a few rules, and kind of let you in on what that is like, but do it in a way that's interesting. That might even be better saved for if I, say, get this nailed down and do Scenario 2. Because with Scenario 2, I've got some cool ideas for that, and I think that it's going to be an interesting diversion. Now, the whole idea between the scenarios and this being an introductory wargame is I want to introduce as many wargaming concepts as possible, or as many different mechanics as feel appropriate to this setting and this game as possible, so that when players play this, even though they're getting it kind of piecemeal with a fairly simple first scenario and some fairly simple rules, as they go through the scenarios, that complexity is going to start layering, but it's going to give them an idea to see the process of the design while they're playing it in a sense, and see, okay, so we're adding tank rules now on a mission that's exclusively focused on tank versus some kind of giant bug roach warfare. But then we get to see, like in Scenario 3, we bring those elements together with the infantry rules, and it gives, the idea is to create this kind of flow of learning where they're not only learning the game and the rules, you know, piecemeal as they go, but it's kind of giving them a glimpse into how you might make something like this. Because that's really what I'm fascinated by in this hobby, is design and making games. And I think the idea that I was pushing when I was talking about RPGs, kind of near the end of that, was making it so that people understand that they can do this. There's a quote in the Simulating War book, and to summarize it, I don't remember where it came from. I wrote it in my blog somewhere, but if you can make a war game, or if you can, play a war game, you can make a war game. Very simple quote, but I think that it's true. I think that if you can learn a game of this scale of complexity, whether it's this or Dungeons & Dragons, especially something like Dungeons and Dragons, where you're forced to come up with a lot of it on your own. And eventually you will get into mechanics. Whether you want to or not, you're going to create something in the world that is not covered by the rules. And you will eventually make up some way to adjudicate or deal with that. So RPGs, I think, more so even than wargames, probably encourage that. I am approaching this from a wargame perspective. But again, to me, they're kind of all one box of frogs. Just the idea that a wargame could have a referee who could be creating new scenarios, kind of sub-scenarios on a fly, which is how these wargames were recommended to be run in their early inception. It predates D&D by a very long time, and that's not a comparison, by the way. That's not, it's better than D&D because it came before. But the idea that the DNA is there, and so the concept of like creating a game as you're playing it, learning those mechanics, that applied to wargames too. This is obviously static with static rules, but as I said earlier, if you wanted to move the bugs around or do something different with the way the bug holes work or whatever, the beauty of any game, I think, is that you can kind of poke it apart and see how it works. If you understand how it works, you can understand how to change it and to make new things. And a lot of the games I make usually start from some other idea. It's obviously deviated from, I want to make a hex and counter version of Warhammer. It's changed into something very, very different than that. But that's the thing. You take an idea, you work with it, understand how it works, and then you can iterate from there and create your own things. So guys, I want to thank you for watching this. If you sat through it all, I'll leave the link for my blog in my YouTube if you're interested in reading the process a little bit more in depth on there. Again, I am not a regular video content producer, creator, but I don't mind making videos when I have an idea that I think is worth sharing and that might help somebody. So if I continue to move into other scenarios, I will definitely do some videos on those, but I will create a follow-up on this so that we can see kind of a stage 2 of what this game looks like after it's been played, after it's been tested, after we've kind of run through some of the ideas and worked out some of the bugs. So thanks very much for watching.